am joined by Christine Bainton and April Hutchinson, both Canadian powerlifters who have experienced transgender intrusion into their strength sport. There's a lot of unfairness they believe that's going on. It's not quite as widespread as it is in the United States, but it's certainly affecting you guys pretty seriously. It's been very disheartening. You feel like you're not being listened to by the overseeing organizations that are involved. So April, tell me what's going on with the sport, and how are you advocating for women's sports integrity?
So I've been basically ever since I kind of found out that there was a trans identifying athlete in my category, in my federation. I've been basically working with women's groups, fighting for women's rights and fairness within my federation. So my federation is the Canadian Powerlifting Union. Unfortunately, they don't have much of a transgender policy. It's very almost non-existent. It's basically you can roll up with a passport that basically states what sex you are, male or female, no questions asked, no medical records, no hormonal testing, anything like that. So, and then you can just compete with whatever your passport says. So that to me is a huge problem. I don't think a lot of the world kind of knew what the policy was like. So this past nationals, which I competed at, we did have the trans identifying male compete in the open category. I did not compete. That was a way for me to boycott and protest, was to not show up and compete against him. We did have some women's groups, the ICFS, attend the event and protest, which was great. It was a silent protest of about 20 women. So since then, unfortunately, my federation has tried to silence me. So anything that I post online, whether it's Instagram or Twitter, even if I post something like save women's sports or keep biological men out of female sports, they screenshot it and they kept it as proof. And they're now threatening me with disciplinary action. So what that entails, I'm not quite sure. It could mean suspension. Wouldn't that be crazy if they suspended a woman out of women's powerlifting for speaking
Wow,
up for women? So that's
that
where I am right now. So
that would be wild if they penalized you. We'll have to stay tuned. That's
yes.
just so disappointing and discouraging. Christine, how did you get involved in this, and what developments have you seen that are concerning, and or do you see any hope for this issue?
Well, basically, in 2019, I did my first competition, and I didn't know at the time, but I suspected that I was competing against a trans identifying male. And it wasn't until this year that I saw photos posted, and people reached out to me after I commented that I thought I competed against Anne. So, basically there was males in my flight, and I was new. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know anyone in powerlifting, so I was just happy to be there. And when I was on the podium, I got second, and then this person came up and spoke, and it was basically a man's voice. So I was shocked and thought either this person was taking steroids or they were probably a male. And it wasn't until this year that I found out otherwise.
So it took 4 years for that suspicion to be confirmed. Like you had that kind of gut feeling that something wasn't right, but
Yeah,
then
basically, I always thought that, but I had no way to confirm. And I didn't compete until, again, until last year because of COVID. So it wasn't until I saw photos on someone's Instagram and I commented saying that looks a lot like the person I competed against. And then basically, April and I got in touch, and then we started talking. And well, basically, now here we are today.
well, how does that feel for you? You said at the time you were a new competitor and the wool was completely pulled over your eyes. You were really defeated by someone that didn't actually have a right to enter that category or had a clear biological advantage over you. But now 4 years later, do you feel as though like you were wronged? And is that like how do you how do you think of that time?
I mean, at the time, I was just happy to be there, so I didn't think much about it. I knew that something wasn't right. But again, I was too new to the world. I really had no idea what was going on. But once I saw the photo this year, I was pretty upset about it. And then I started looking into the policy, and basically, it's non existent, as April said. All you have to do is change your gender online, which is a simple form, and then you can compete with women. And as you know, our association, we're drug tested and all of that. We can't take anything. In fact, they tell us, to not even take protein powder because it might be tainted and all of these things. So it's just really disheartening to witness and to understand, like, how it's possible that I can't take anything, but someone who is a male and was born a male can just come in and compete against women. We all know that there's a very big difference. That's why there are gender categories to begin with. So to me, it just doesn't really make a lot of sense.
And we've already discussed it doesn't exactly level the playing field simply to test for testosterone levels, but it at least attempts to try to balance it out a little bit more. But the CPU doesn't even monitor that, right?
No, they don't.
So the testosterone levels can be sky high. The muscle advantages from puberty are already built in. And so all you have to do, and there's not usually other organizations in the United States, I think even the Olympics, you have to identify as that preferred gender for a minimum of 2 years. So, I mean, as we know, that this individual that you guys have faced in competitions and tournaments, um, they are, I don't know how long the transition process was, but it's bizarre that there is no monitoring whatsoever of these people, at least to attempt to make it okay for you to compete against them.
Well, that's the thing. The only testing that there is done is like some lifters can get tested at the competitions. So basically, I got tested at Worlds last year. So you compete after that. They basically take you into a room. They test you for banned substances, stuff like that. But I mean, there's also out of meet testing. But you have to be placed in a pool, like an athletic pool, to be tested. Either at home or at your gym, just randomly. But I just talked to the IPF, the International Powerlifting Federation president, just about an hour ago on the phone with chief medical doctors, and they were explaining that the CPU should have been following the IPF policy. Most federations do, and that policy is a little bit better, than the CPU, which is non-existent. So the IPF transgender policy basically does monitor hormonal levels, I believe, for 4 years. You have to be monitored and submit medical documents from doctors, psychologists, basically stating that they do suffer from body dysmorphia. So, I mean, that's a better start, but like I asked the doctor, it still doesn't take in play all the physiological advantages that a male has, like the bone
Right.
density, muscle mass. Here in Canada, the specific transgender athlete, we have a 6 foot tall, 250 pound biological male, right? That transitioned when he was 22 years old. So he went through full blown puberty, right? As a male.
Right.
So again, there's been proof that there's an advantage, specifically in strength sports. I think it's like a 60% advantage just in bench press alone when you're born a male. So,
Well, and then this person had the audacity in his social media to criticize the bench press of other female competitors, knowing full well that there is an advantage he enjoys that they do not. And so it's one thing to quietly accept that you're being allowed in this space basically without the consent of the majority of the members, as you've said, right? It's another thing to gloat and to brag and to ridicule the women who are they've worked their whole lives for this. Your accolades, you guys have worked so hard, and it's a huge feat to be a woman in this field. So, what do you think the solution is at the end of the day? A third category?
Um, I guess I'll answer first. I do believe that's the best thing. Well, okay, if we really wanted what women wanted, it would be biological males compete against biological males. So, I think, and then obviously after that would be a separate class. Like many have done this, open category, where trans athletes can compete. I mean, especially in powerlifting, like it's not a team, right? It's an individual sport. Okay, so it would work really well for powerlifting. And third, I guess, I think where we're going is with the IPF policy. It's monitoring, but I'm not happy with it, and I'll tell you, probably majority of women aren't going to be happy with this policy. But I mean, at least it's a start. And even the president did say on the phone, this is a situation, as more transgenders come out, that's going to have to be looked at every year. It's going to have to be reevaluated, the policy, and looked at. And I think that's a really smart thing for him to say, and I think it's absolutely true.
Right. Yeah, it needs to be reevaluated for sure. This is definitely this is becoming more common, unfortunately not less common.
Yeah.
So, and Christine, I don't know if you agree there should be maybe kind of a third division, or maybe
I definitely agree. There should be an optional third category, but I mean, when it comes to sports, you really have to compete with your biological sex, or perhaps a new category. However, unfortunately, most people in that world, they don't want a third category, so that's going to be really tough, I think. But when it comes to sports, it's all about fairness and level playing field. I mean, even in the Olympics, there's been women banned for having naturally too high of testosterone. So it's not that we're discriminating against a certain group. It's that we're trying to keep sports fair and keep the integrity of sports. And that's really what it's all about. So that happens in all levels of sports, regardless of male, female, or other.
Right. It's very clear you both love lifting. You want everybody to lift. It's not a question of that. It's more so, basically your opportunities to lift, women's opportunities to lift could be erased and could be completely nullified if this sort of thing continues, right?
Mm-hmm. I do think, like women's sports will be no longer if we open these floodgates and we blur all the lines and let this happen. And it's funny, just going back to you asking us what we think, like here you are, Caroline, asking us what we would like, and that's wonderful. And that's the way it should be, because not once has our federation actually asked women what we want. You have a CPU board, which is predominantly males, making these rules, let alone, just saying, okay, you just bend over and take it. Like this is the way it's going to be, not hearing our voices. And if we do speak up, we get reprimanded and, we suffer disciplinary action, right? So it's horrible, let alone, like you said, like this is a whole other rabbit hole, but having to like share locker rooms, right? Like I myself, I've been sexually assaulted. I don't feel very comfortable being in a bathroom alone with a full grown male. So
absolutely. Wow. I mean, this is the thing, like your voices matter. And it's so ironic that, all of the triumphs of the last decades in terms of women's rights, women's opportunities have been completely shut down for the sake of this new identity group, this new frontier. And, at least the International Cycling Union, at least they, conducted a poll of their members. Some of these organizations have done surveys. They've at least asked the members for their input. You guys have been completely not even ignored. To ignore you, they'd have to ask for your opinion, and they haven't done that. And so it's extremely disappointing. We will continue to elevate your voices. Thank you so much, Christine and April, for your time, and all the best to you both.